Quick announcement before we get into it. We do have new merch at our merch store and Patreon has been updated, but more on that at the end of the video. Hello everybody, and welcome back to Aurorin Expounded, the show where I, your humble DM, goes over the world building and general things that you need to know when you go adventuring within the world of Aurorin. So far, we've covered a basic overview of gods, land masses, the oceans, historical events, things like that. But today, I think I'd want to make a little bit of a U-turn to talk about something to deal with the gods once again. Now, I am a sucker for gods in fantasy settings. I love massive pantheons, hence the reason why my pantheon in the world of Aurorin is pretty extensive, and honestly, I'm still adding to it as of right now. But one of the most important things to the existence of a god in a fantasy world is a way to exert their influence on the world around them. Now, obviously, they can influence the world directly to some extent, like the god of storms can conjure a storm as needed, but I want to talk about a bit more of an indirect method. There are three main ways that a god or goddess influences the world indirectly, and that is either through an avatar, an emissary, or a vessel. So let's go ahead and talk about each of those and see if we have come across any of them before. To start things off, let's talk about vessels, probably the most simple of the concepts. Now, traditionally, how I portray the vessels in Aurorin is more accurate to what is usually called an avatar. However, in the world of Aurorin, avatar has a different meaning. So a vessel is an artificial creation or construct or something that is made for the god's consciousness to directly inhabit. For example, if you erected a statue of stone to Rokmarok, the god of the earth, stone, mountains, things like that, and he were to inhabit that statue, that would be considered a vessel, as he is in direct control of it, as if he was occupying that body. And in extreme cases, and very rare cases where a god or goddess possesses a body or person, that is also sort of a vessel in of itself. However, that almost never happens, at all. But it is not entirely outside of the realm of possibility. Not all the gods have vessels, and not all the gods want vessels. However, they do have specific rituals that need to be performed to make a vessel viable for them. Just a rough example, if you wanted to summon Insidious, the god of fire, you'd probably need a lot of kerosene and a lot of heat. Gods and goddesses can't make vessels directly, they do have to be prepared for them by followers. When they do occupy a vessel, it does not house the entirety of their being. It does not have the full scope of their power, and they are not trapped within it. If you destroy a vessel, you simply just send that bit of their consciousness right back to the original source. In terms of creature variety, most vessels are going to end up being constructs in terms of the rules of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. There are no currently known vessels active within the world of Aurorin at the moment. However, some have been called upon in circumstances of dire need, such as in the War of Black Gates, where there was an attempt to make some vessels. However, those fell through. Luckily, we discussed as they found a way to close the gates, so they didn't end up really needing the vessels, but they did attempt to bring them about. The last thing you need to know about vessels is they do have sort of an expiration date. Even a fraction of a god's power, even if it's just a tiny bit, can't be contained on the material plane for long. So the vessels have a pretty short lifespan before they crumble under the weight of their own immense existence. But if a god is not influencing the world through a vessel, how else could one do it? Let's move on to the next category. Emissaries are actually individual creatures that are separate from the gods themselves, yet created or at least controlled directly from the god's influence. Some of them are completely of independent thought, but do act on the will of the god because that is their very existence. Most emissaries are going to fall under the category of being a celestial, however, there are some exceptions to the rules. An exception to this rule we have actually seen on the stream in the Paragon campaign. Calum, the patron of the Sky Dancers in Alabast, is an emissary of the god Asarian, also known as the Skyfather or Stormbearer, Windlord. He's all about, storm, sky, wind, all that stuff. However, Calum is an exception to the rule, as she doesn't fit the category of celestial. It is more accurate that she is a primordial or elemental. But she still serves the same function as the rest of the emissaries, as she is an extension of the god's will. Another well-known emissary is in the capital city of Hirashal, and that is the Great Tree, an emissary of the goddess Vita Matros, who is the goddess of nature, also known as the Wild Heart, nature, plants, beasts, pretty much a druid's godmother. And of course, the god of death's emissary is known as the Reaper, a skeletal figure clad in a dark cloak wielding a scythe, come to claim your soul and send it to the correct and fitting afterlife. These creatures are always made intentionally by the gods to exert their will, and every single god does have at least one emissary. However, some do have multiple, and each one is very unique in their own way. They don't all follow the same rules. And just because a god has an emissary doesn't mean it is currently active on the material plane. It could be anywhere really within the multiverse. It could be in the Feywild, but most likely they are serving their respective god directly in their divine domain. While all emissaries are a extension of their respective gods, they don't always receive direct orders and kind of just exist and do their thing on their own out in the world. As they are quite literally extensions of the god's power, they can't really do anything that would be contrary to what the god wants done. They're not really capable of rebelling, at least not without help from some outside force. But what happens when a mortal can rise to the same status as an emissary? The final category of these extensions of the gods and goddesses is known as an avatar. An avatar is a mortal being who has the power of the god or goddess channeled through them, or at the very least, their will channeled through them. Avatars aren't always created intentionally, and they also aren't always created willingly. An example of an avatar, and we will discuss this specific character in much more depth later, as his history does tie into Alabast's history and is relevant to actually both the Paragon campaign and the Blood Money campaign, is an entity known as the Angel of Anarchy. The Angel of Anarchy is an avatar of the god Kaor, who is the god of anarchy, rebellion, but also reform and rebuilding. Now, there have been two known Angels of Anarchy. One is part of the Alabast history, and the other is actually yet to be fully revealed to my players. In multiple cases, the Angel of Anarchy has helped tear down corrupt organizations and governments only to rebuild them better and liberate the people from oppressive regimes. However, the first Angel of Anarchy rebelled and then was subsequently slayed by the person who would become the second. And that's kind of the key difference between emissaries and avatars. Avatars are not created by the gods. They are still mortals with a complete will of their own. So they are under no obligation to keep serving the god once they gain that power or responsibility. And there are some cases where the god can't just revoke the power from them, as they are too far gone or their connection to them is lost in some way, shape, or form. Hence the reason it fell on the second Angel of Anarchy to kill the first. But there are some ways that you can unintentionally become an avatar of the god's power, even if you're not directly acting in the will, but acting in a manner that represents the god. For example, in the Paragon campaign, pretty early on, they faced a cannibal, an Earth Genasi cannibal that was living in a cave beneath the city of Thurnwald. Now, he was not an avatar by any means. However, he was probably well on his way to being one, an avatar of the god Balarath, who is god of cannibalism, cruelty, vile acts, depravity, just all around bad. You want an example of what Balarath is all about? He's, well, based off of Baal in Forgotten Realms lore, or Molag Bal if you find yourself an Elder Scrolls fan. Most avatars start out as clerics, at least the ones intentionally trying to enact a god's will, but avatars are very, very few and far between. There is no limit to the number of avatars that a god can have active at one time, as they are not channeling their power through them directly, more giving them the keys to use their own power to enact their will. There are a lot of historical figures that have been at least theorized to be an avatar of different gods and goddesses. However, it is very hard to prove that fact without being told outright by a god or goddess. And unless you have a very high level cleric in your party, good luck finding that out. Becoming an avatar is also not usually an act of prophecy, and usually is more down to happenstance. But, unlike the emissaries, there is one very important thing to always keep in mind about these avatars. And that is, no matter how much power they accrue through their god, through their avatar status, by enacting their will or being chosen by destiny or by circumstance or just being the best person for the job that the god chose, at the end of the day, they're still only mortal. It can die just like any other mortal. But, to be fair, might take a couple more swings of that axe to get the job done. Thank you all so much for watching. I love making these videos and just kind of nerding out. When I first started making these videos, I was thinking I was going to do more of a storytelling kind of thing, but I kind of like just these casual, I'm talking into the mic, to the camera right here, and just kind of nerding out a little bit. There will be some story ones to come where, I'll go all out, do all the voices, things like that. Turn on my narrator voice or whatever the hell I want to do, but still kind of just working on that, workshop and things. But before we head out today, a couple of announcements. Like I stated at the beginning of the video, we have a couple new items in the merch store, which I will be displaying right here. Our wonderful artist Erica made some absolutely fantastic pieces of art to put on the merch here. Just a couple of jokes that were made during our stream, and they were just too perfect not to capture. We also made a couple changes to the Patreon subscriptions. So if you are an adventure tier, you get early access to videos, you get to be in private Discord chats, and you get some behind the scenes content, and you'll get shoutouts in videos like this. And I will also be releasing these Aurorin Expounded videos 1 week early from here on out, after this episode, to Patreon members only. So you'll get a week early access to these episodes, as well as the other stuff that we'll be making in the future. Now, the next tier that was added is the Paragon tier, which comes with everything in the tiers before it, but it also comes with even more exclusive Discord access, which we are working on programming those into the Discord at the moment. However, you will also get access to limited time patron exclusive merch and a permanent 15% off all merch when you buy it. But no matter what tier you choose, we are incredibly appreciative of the support, and even if you don't support us on there, just a like, comment, and subscribe will do us wonders. But speaking of patrons, before we head on out, I'd like to give a shout out to our patron D4 fan at the Adventurer tier. Once again, thank you so much for the support, and it really helps us, get motivated to do this stuff, and just, it feels really nice knowing that somebody likes what we're doing. So, with all is said and done, that's going to be it for me. Thank you all so much, and goodbye.